Is bullying today more insidious, or is it the same as it's always been? That is the question that we're discussing today on the Opinion Talk Show, the talk show where your opinions matter. I am Mirna Santiago, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Adeline Ortiz and Marco Caviglia. Well, these days it seems like I never get through a news cycle without seeing some news about some child, 10, 11, 12 years old, killing themselves over bullying or what they perceive to be bullying. So the question I'd like to start with you, Adeline, is the bullying today more insidious? Is it more serious than it was when we were growing up? Or is it the same as it always has been?
Well, the short answer is yes. I think that it is more insidious today. I think that bullying has always existed. I can certainly remember being bullied when I was a kid. You know, middle school was hell. Mm-hmm. And I have two middle school children now who are sort of negotiating some of it themselves. But it is so different. It seems so much more extreme today than it did when I was a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, you reported it and it was dealt with. It was taken care of. The school administration would get on it. Law enforcement would get involved if necessary. But it was dealt with, and there was so much more respect for school administration and for law enforcement that would pretty much resolve it. Today, it seems that there is no respect. There's no respect for authority, and so the kids, and I say kids because I think bullying is sort of more that age group of middle school, high school, really are just taking it to much further levels. And I think that social media has certainly exacerbated the means, the opportunity, the forms of bullying, and the fact that you can't escape it. You can't just turn off your phone and not know that you're being bullied, that you're being technologically abused, because it's still going to reach you.
Marco, what do you think?
Well, I think that we're much more aware of bullying because of technology, the social media, the internet, and also because of that technology, you have much more of the bullying. So, and hence the cyberbullying concept. But I really think it's always existed. Anybody who's been a child has always experienced it, and it's part of growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually of the same opinion. I think it's actually the same. I don't think people have changed any. I think, unfortunately, it's a part of growing up, and that was part of the things that I went through coming here from another country and learning the language. And I always thought, well, maybe if I get to this point, if I learn how to speak English, or if I stop dressing this certain way, then the bullies will stop. But they don't. I think every stage that you go through in life, there's someone who's going to be a bully at some point. So I don't think it's changed. I think we're more aware of it, as Marco said, because we're seeing it on the news and it's on the digital media. But I think it's probably about the same as it has been. But Marco, I want to ask you, because I know you come from a prosecutorial background. What can be done to stem the tide of bullying? Like, let's say your kid gets bullied. What can you do in terms of prosecution, in terms of filing charges? What is it that parents can do to try to help their child so that it doesn't get to the point where that child feels like they have to harm themselves to get away from the bullies?
Well, first of all, it depends on where they're being bullied. If they're being bullied in school, the schools have come out with guidelines pursuant to new legislation, which maybe we'll address later on. But if it's outside of the school environment, as well as in the school environment, there are laws that protect not only adults but children. I mean, it's a child can be harassed just like an adult can be harassed. A child can be assaulted just like an adult can be assaulted. And there are laws on the books. It's the only difference is that the victim's young and the bully's probably young. And but we have family court. Family court has jurisdiction of children of virtually any age over 6, and they go there in lieu of criminal court and are prosecuted by a county attorney. And they're not going to go to jail necessarily, because you can't send them to jail. But in worst case scenarios, they can go to a facility. They used to call it the Division for Youth. Or they can have all sorts of different things. Probation, they can have programs, they can have a learning type of experience. So there are many things that can be done. It's just you have to know what system to put it in.
Well, again, I think that bullying is definitely far more insidious now. And as you mentioned, because of the technology that's available in social media. Now it's not just bullying, just the bully and the victim, but it's the widespread circulation of negative content about that victim. It's getting so many other people on board to bully that victim that makes it so much worse, and it makes it so extreme. I mean, you started the show by mentioning the deaths that come each year, that have been reported each year as a result of bullying. And I think that social media plays a really large role in that, because if it's just the bully and the victim, you can escape that. You really can. But when that bully is using technological tools, a cell phone, social media, computers, email, telephone, whatever it is, you're using all of this variety of sources available to them to spread negative information about the victim, then it does make it far more worse. And I think that it also makes it worse because these kids don't know. They're not aware of the consequences that you just mentioned. The fact that they could be liable, that they could end up in some juvenile sort of prison facility. I recently did a bullying presentation to a middle school in Yonkers of over 200 middle school kids, and I invited a youth officer to join me, and he said as early as 10 years old, you can be arrested and you can face criminal charges for your bullying conduct, and that those charges can be increased when you use technology to further your bullying activities.
Let me ask you this though, because I know there are some parents who, especially if their kids are being accused of bullying, and they're saying that people are too shrill and they're over-exaggerating and overreacting to simple conduct that all kids do. Like now I know kids can get arrested if they snap someone's bra in a classroom because it's called sexual harassment now in school, whereas when we were growing up, it was just called growing up, So a lot of the opponents of these anti-bullying laws are saying you're going to criminalize pretty much every human conduct, because anything could be considered bullying. So you were talking about perhaps going to family court, and you were talking about the youth officer mentioning that. So I'd like to hear from you guys maybe about what kind of conducts is it that is considered bullying, and how do you criminalize that? How do you prosecute that? Because there's so much.
Well, it may be criminal conduct, but not everything comes with the same degree of consequences, and you can speak to this, Marco. But I know that there are obviously different degrees of charges that you can charge somebody with. And I'll give you an example of sort of a cyberbullying that happened last year. Somebody posted on Facebook that it was National Grab My Breast Day. Okay, this is like a 3 consecutive days of National Grab My Breast, Grab My Butt, Grab My this and that, and whatever. And so at the middle schools, all of a sudden, and even on some of the high school levels, you had kids grabbing each other's, breasts, grabbing each other's butts. And I know that I spoke with law enforcement in the precinct where my kids go to school, and they said, well, yes, this is forcible touching, and if you've experienced an incident like this, and if there were witnesses, then the child who engaged in this conduct will be arrested, and they will be prosecuted, and they will be looking at criminal charges. This is not just a family court matter. This is unwanted sexual contact. And all that started, of course, again, with social media.
Well, Marco, what do you think? What kind of behaviors are we talking about?
Well, we're basically talking about, in that context, what would be, if you clearly did it as an adult, would be a criminal behavior. New York State passed the Dignity for All Students Act in 2010, and then amended it in 2013. And now, within a school context, if a teacher or administrator becomes aware of a bullying incident, it must be reported within 1 day to the superintendent or to the principal. And then an investigation is done, and the result of the investigation is reported to the student who was victimized, the offending student, and the parents of both. And then it's determined what, if any, discipline will be used on the offending student pursuant to the Code of Conduct for Students. And the important thing here is that it's an escalating sort of punishment thing. It's not a zero tolerance program, and that's very important, because you don't want a young child who just stepped over the line and isn't that emotionally mature or even intellectually mature to suddenly jump the line and now they're a criminal. And that's the danger of law enforcement, sometimes they get a call, you're arrested, well, he's underage, okay, he's going to go to family court. And you have this child who may just have been caught up in a thing like because of social media.
Right.
So that's one of the situations. Now contrast that to other situations. I've represented, for example, teenage girls that because of the social media, they start trash talking each other cybernetically, and then the next thing you know,
that's
they're
considered cyberbullying.
and then they're meeting out to show up, and people show up, including the parents, including the parents who are egging the students on about the way I taught you to fight. These are girls, and these are the mothers. Don't get me wrong. It's not some macho guy, It's very bizarre what's going on, and so much of it is linked in to the technology that's available for kids to magnify their poor approaches.
Absolutely. Exactly what you described is what happened in this Yonkers school district, and what prompted the school to invite me to come in and give a presentation to the students about bullying and cyberbullying and the consequences, because they actually had dealt with an all-out brawl that again started through the use of social media and this sort of back and forth exchanges between a small group of students that broadened and spread very quickly. It ended up being a huge fight after school. Wow. Parents were involved. Parents were attacked and attacked each other, and even some of the children. So it was an absolute nightmare. There were multiple arrests, and it was really an absolute nightmare. Really over something that started between two kids. So this is what I mean. Like years ago, when I was in middle school, my mom came in, your mom came in, and we talked about it in the dean's office, and everybody just kind of went their way, and we didn't look at each other anymore. Not now. Now it can potentially turn into an all-out brawl before the school day's over.
Well, let me ask you this, because that's something different, though. I mean, that's actually a fight or physical contact that's going on. And I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to be embarrassed now when everybody sees this. But when I was a kid, there were four of us, and my mother, we were poor, as I've mentioned before, and my mother used to go to Alexander's in the Bronx.
You're dating yourself now.
And she would buy things from the bargain basement. And one season, my mother found these two coats, and they were faux fur, right?
Oh, no.
For my sister and I. And I swear, these coats looked like they were dog fur, but like of a dog that had mange or something. I mean, it was just horrible. So I knew that we were going to suffer for wearing these coats. So we wore these coats, and the minute we get out of the building, the kids from the building start congregating, right? And so we're walking to school, and we start getting a pack of kids, like maybe up to 20 kids, and they're barking at us.
Well, you deserve the beating for that coat.
So they're just following us to school, and they're barking, and we get to the school. I know it wasn't funny at the time.
No.
So we get to the school, and then of course the bullies at the school now see this pack of kids barking, so now they're barking at us throughout the school, throughout the day. Now, there's nothing that happened. I mean, other than being in fear and what have you, they didn't do anything to us. So is that bullying, and how would you prosecute that if it is?
Well, what is bullying? I think that we need to define that, right? We do need to define what is bullying. It's harassing, it's stalking, it's menacing, it's threatening behavior.
Well, that's one of the problems. Bullying is a term of art. If I'm browbeating you, which used to be, is that bullying? Because everybody knows what browbeating is, but is that bullying? If I'm at a workplace and I'm saying how terrible a job you're doing, but I'm your boss, you say that's part of the job. If I tell you what a terrible job you're doing, but I'm a coworker, is that bullying?
Yeah, that's true.
Because you're not pulling your weight. I mean, so, and when everybody turns, well, we have to have the law protect us. You have to have clear definitions, and you have to look at behavior more than just words, because you still have First Amendment free speech. Where does that? So it's very complex. So the safest thing is you always look at physical. Barking at you after going to school, I don't think that's bullying. I mean,
but
that's
if I was in fear of my life,
well, exactly. I think that's where
that's
where the definition really does need to go. It's something that puts you in fear, for your safety, that it's threatening towards you, that makes you believe that harm is coming your way in some way. And when a mob of 20 kids is following you and barking. you start to think that maybe that beating is pretty close. So you're in fear of your safety. You're in apprehension, right? And so that is a crime, though. Being in fear of that, or imminent threat, that's a crime.
If it's
That's a crime if you're adult. If it is reasonable, I think under the circumstances where her mom bought her, poor dead dog's coat.
Then her mother should be arrested.
She should have been arrested for buying you that coat.
So the problem, though, is that we have to get to some sort of definition. I mean, like, one of the things that happened in a case in Florida, actually, where the kid did actually kill herself. And it started off with cyberbullying. She went to a school. She was in the middle school. Apparently, she had a little boyfriend, sent him some nudie shots. Well, she liked the guy and sent him some nudie shots. The boy had a girlfriend, and he showed the shots, to the girlfriend. The girlfriend took the shots and uploaded them, right? Which is criminal. It would be criminal behavior for an adult if they did that, but this was a 12-year-old. So she uploaded them, and then all the kids, became a mob and started harassing this 12-year-old. The mother said, "Let me take her out of the school. I'm going to put her in another school." Well, because of the cyber thing, the digital media, the social media, the other kids at the school were able to now get the images of this poor girl, and eventually she just killed herself. She went to some construction site and threw herself down. So of course this got a lot of attention. So everybody decided to, we have to do something. We have to do something. So the legislature in that particular town decided to first prosecute the two girls, and they wanted them prosecuted as adults, which ultimately didn't happen. And they ended up dropping the charges somehow because I think one of the girls was kind of like, well, I didn't do anything. Like, they uploaded on her computer, but it wasn't her who did the uploading, it was another girl. So they ended up dropping the charges. Then the girl's mother decided to sue the parents of the bullies. So now in several jurisdictions have actually tried to implement laws that would hold the parents of the bullies responsible, which is, to me, I find horrifying. So, and I don't think that went anywhere in Florida, but other jurisdictions keep bringing these types of statutes up. So do you think parents of bullies should be held responsible?
I think so. I mean, let me speak to the law issue for a minute, because I think in New York State, cyberbullying only became a crime as of last year, July 1st, 2013. Cyberbullying finally became a crime in New York State. Before that, something like circulating, a nudie photo like that was not a crime. It was really maybe dissemination of pornographic materials, something like that. But now something like that does fall under the bullying statute. Something like that would be prosecuted under that statute. That aside, I mean, the criminal component, I think that parents should be held liable on the civil side. I was recently in Pennsylvania, and I was speaking with a group of moms out there, and they told me that what they do in their particular county is that when their child is charged with bullying or engaging in bullying conduct or having initiated a fight or conflict with a schoolmate, that the parent is fined $500.
I don't like that.
The parent is fined. So long as the evidence supports that their child was engaged in this behavior, that their child initiated this conduct, the parent is held to that $500 fine for the child's behavior. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think that
like that.
It kind of forces the parent to have those conversations with the kids, like, you just can't do this, I mean, even if they say, you just can't do it, you can't fight, you have to report it to someone, you have to, get the school administration involved, or teach them sort of alternative options to hitting, to bullying, to engaging in this behavior.
Marco?
I just want to correct one thing. It's always been, and still is, a felony to sext a picture of a underage child by your cell phone or over the internet, even if you or yourself are a minor. So you got a 15-year-old showing a breast shot, sending it over the internet and all the 15-year-olds are passing it around. Each one of those is a felony.
Wow.
And some jurisdictions do prosecute these teenagers as felons. So and that predates the cyber law. I just wanted to correct that. And I'm sorry, I forgot what the point was.
We wanted to talk about whether parents should be held responsible for...
Oh, well, there are a number of laws in New York State that do hold parents responsible for the acts of their children. There's not too many of them, but like, for example, if you go to a graveyard and you knock over tombstones, the parents are responsible. I can't remember the amount, up to $1,500 or something. But these are very few laws on there. And so what they're doing is imposing on the parents some sort of fine or punishment to blame them for what their kids did. And this goes back to, you know, who's responsible for your child if not you. But if that's the case, you should be responsible for everything your child does, right? And not just one thing. I don't know how you selectively decide to pick one act over another, other than
Well, I have to tell you, I don't agree with that, because kids are not little robots. You can't program them when they leave your house and say you can't do this or you're not going to do this. And I know, not from firsthand experience for my son, thank God, because he's a little angel. But
Perfectly linked.
But last year he was being bullied by someone at school, and the kid's mother was well aware that he was bullying my son. And you know, I really wanted to tie that woman down and take a tweezer and just pull each of her hairs out one by one. I just, you know, like by the end of the school year, I was just so angry about the whole thing, because I felt she did nothing to remedy the situation. That being said, you know, she's not with her child 99% of the time. She's not with him during the school day when he's doing the bullying. She's not, you know, so you can talk till you're blue, but a lot of these kids are just so, you know, they're autonomous. And I don't think it's fair to hold a parent, especially criminally responsible. I know you can be held in tort if your son does something wrong or damages property and that sort of thing. But when you're talking about criminal responsibility, where now it goes on your record, maybe, right? Is that what would happen to the parents if you're being held criminally responsible?
if you're criminally responsible, convicted, yes. You know, and people look at what your conviction was, a misdemeanor or a felony. They don't ask too much about you know, what particular type of crime you were convicted of.
I don't know about criminal liability, but certainly some sort of, you know, civil penalties. After all, you're the one who's responsible for developing that child morally and their values. And if you're having those conversations at home, then there's really no reason for that child to be out there engaging in this behavior. But if they do, then yes, it should reflect on the parents.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have for the bullying topic, but as always, we have our lightning round, and our lightning round is, should all corporal punishment, spanking, be illegal? This is something that's coming up now, because a lot of the more liberal states like New York and California want to ban any sort of discipline by a parent that has to do with the corporal, you know, with the body. They don't want parents to be able to hit their kids for any reason. Then you have the states like Tennessee and Mississippi, who are now trying to go the opposite way, which is that there are laws on the books that say you can spank your child, but you can't leave welts or marks or bruises. And they're saying, well, you shouldn't limit the parents. You're tying the parents' hands because, God forbid, you hit your kid with a belt, which a lot of parents do, and you happen to leave a mark, now you're going to be criminally prosecuted. So they're saying you should take those off the books. So I'm going to start this time with Marco. Should all corporal punishment, spanking, be illegal?
I don't know if it should all be illegal. You know, spanking is what? If you have a toddler and you just pat him on the rear end, you know, just to get his attention. To me, that's not really spanking. If you put somebody over you and you really, grind down on that, you can really cause a lot of pain and injury. But I think the problem is when you have a parent who decides to discipline their child when he or she is angry. That I've found over the years is the biggest component when they overdo it, even if it's, especially if it's corporeal punishment. I think that I'm not in favor of violence against children, even if you call it discipline, because I think that you as an adult should be able to outsmart that child, outthink that child to do what you want him or her to do. Well, you should. You got to figure it out. If you can't, you're doing something wrong. You should get assistance in terms of, okay, how do I do this? And also, when children reach a certain age, you can beat them, and it's not going to do a lot of good. It's just going to turn them into violent adults because they can take it by that point in time, and they're going to learn to dish it out, especially upon you when they're big enough. So I don't think that's the right approach.
Adeline?
I agree. Of course, I remember growing up, my parents beat me up on a regular basis. Okay, forget about leaving welts. I could feel the sting of the belt and, count the welts on the bottom. Like, oh my goodness. But I can tell you, I never did whatever it is that I did wrong that day. Never happened again, for sure.
Yeah.
It was immediate corrective. The thing is, back then, you know, when I was a kid, everybody was allowed to hit you. Your teachers were allowed to hit you.
Aunts, uncles.
Your aunts, uncles, the grandparents, you know, and it was just so accepted. I think it went too far. I think that's what happened, and that's why now you find all of these parents who are in big trouble for disciplining their children and really going too far in that discipline. I don't believe in physically disciplining my children because I believe that it sends the wrong message, and sort of piggybacking on the bullying discussion, I think that they grow up to think that they can resolve conflict through fights, through hitting, and this is where it really comes from. When you have children who are physically disciplined, that's really the only lesson that you're sending to them, is that I can get my way by hitting you. I can get you to do or behave in the way that I need you to or want you to by hitting you. I'm big on communicating with my children. I think that it's really important to have those conversations, not to give them the impression that they have some leverage and negotiating power, or that they are on par with you as a parent. You still need to be a parent, but I think that I will always choose that conversation over physically disciplining my children.
I think, you know, a couple of years ago, it was before I had my child, I went to Honduras, where there are no laws against what you can and cannot do to your children. I mean, these people, you know, like, I'm not going to say these people, they're my people, but, you know, they'll sell their kid or just bring them over. Like, you're visiting from America, and they're like, here, have a kid. You know, just take my kid. I don't want them anymore. I can't feed them or whatever. Just take them. So I remember walking down the street before I had my son, and there was, it was my little nephew, actually, and my uncle had beaten him so bad that he couldn't put any clothes on. He had, with a belt buckle, and he literally had skin falling off his back. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm not gonna hit my kid, you know, because we grew up getting hit and beaten and everything else, and it was okay, it was acceptable, and anybody could do it, like you said. That being said, I'm okay with the laws the way they are. I think if you feel like you need to be able to spank your child, to sort of press that reset button, because sometimes, you know, I know what you're saying about talking and outsmarting and everything else, but if you have a 4-year-old throwing a tantrum, you know,
Good whack will fix it.
Yes, a whack on the bottom is like, what happened? You know, it's like a reset button. So I think the laws are fine exactly the way they are. So if you guys have nothing else,
I
then
like that reset button thing. Where is that? We'll just keep patting you up until we find it.
You know, well, that's all we have for the opinion. So for you viewers out there, please keep sending us your comments, your emails. Keep leaving us comments on YouTube. We do read them, and we're going to start reading them again online. So thank you.